him claiming that maybe he'd been mugged, a claim the police are no longer investigating. Well, our reporter Nick Thatcher is outside the Irish Embassy tonight. Now, that, of course, is where this whole strange story began. Over to you, Nick.
Yes, Katie, it was 2 weeks ago tonight the Bishop of Southwark was here at the Irish Embassy enjoying Christmas drinks. It's the sort of reception he's been going to over the past 20 years or so, and usually on these occasions he enjoys a glass or two of wine, and he is, quote, very careful. But his journey home remains something of a blur, and 2 weeks on he's still having difficulty explaining exactly what happened. He says it wasn't because he was drunk, he simply can't remember. It's the first time since the night in question that we've heard the bishop speak. It's a night he may well wish to forget, if only he could remember what happened. The Bishop of Southwark says he has no memory of his journey home from a drinks reception and can't fully explain how he came to suffer head injuries or to lose his belongings. Was he drunk? No, he insists. It would be entirely out of character. Instead, he says he's suffering from amnesia.
It's very worrying. I still have amnesia. I'm having extensive medical tests, and they're going on. I remember nothing from the early time of the party until getting back into my home.
Well, what's reported to have happened on the night in question makes for a most unusual story. And perhaps the strangest part of this tale is what's alleged to have happened here, on the aptly named Crucifix Lane. We've reconstructed what witnesses claim happened that night. They saw a man getting into the back of a Mercedes car. There were toys on the seat, and the man's alleged to have thrown them around. When challenged, he's said to have replied, "I'm the Bishop of Southwark. It's what I do."
I seen a nice, good-looking man, clean shave, wearing a nice, clean overcoat, black color, doing the thing that I didn't expect. I mean, nobody expects.
There are elements in that story that I find extremely difficult. How I could have broken into a locked car and set off the alarm. How you know, sometimes the reports say it's the Bishop of Southwark, sometimes they say it's the Bishop of Woolwich. I certainly, around that car, got a very bad head wound on the back of my head.
The bishop was later photographed with what appeared to be a black eye. He denies misleading a member of his congregation by saying he'd been mugged, insisting his injuries are consistent with a mugging. The police, though, are no longer investigating. The briefcase he lost on the night has been recovered by a national newspaper. His mobile phone is still missing. And the bishop himself says that Oyster card records from the night itself show that he made his journey home from here at the Irish Embassy to his house in Streatham on tube and on bus. And he says, "I do defy anyone who's had too much to drink to make that journey." On the subject of his amnesia, he says, "I'm going through the whole gamut of tests to find out what's happened. I'm really worried," he says. And on those calls for him to step down, the bishop again tonight is saying he won't be resigning.
Thank you, Nick, very much indeed.
Right, let's have a look at some other stories making the headlines in the capital tonight. A mother from Essex has been convicted of killing her 2 young daughters and 2 teenagers in a head-on car crash whilst she was high on drugs. All 4 were in the car when Davina Smith, the car that she had stolen to take one of her children to the doctor. She suddenly swerved to the other side of the road and ploughed into an oncoming car in Tilbury in January. She'll be sentenced next year.
Blessing Olatiwola, who was 12, has been named as the girl who died after being hit by a bus in South London. The accident happened just after 7 o'clock last night on Peckham Rye, near the junction with Nunhead Lane. Police are appealing for witnesses.
Mayor Ken Livingstone wants to quadruple the number of recycling centres in London. The capital currently recycles 20% of its household waste, which the mayor says is disgraceful when compared with Berlin's 83% or San Francisco's 75%. He wants London's figure doubled by 2020.
And a £5 stamp went for more than £15,000 at auction today in London. That's a new world record for its type. It was issued in 1867. It was mainly used for accounting. The buyer's identity wasn't revealed. Now, Now, the first full-blooded contest of the London's Olympics is now underway, 6 years before the Games begin. On one side, 2012 bosses determined to clear land for vital construction. On the other, 80 businesses, which are so far refusing to budge.
But today, the bosses have been given an edge, the power to evict the firms if they can't strike a deal. Well, our political correspondent Simon Harris reports now on this Olympic showdown.
It will soon be London's biggest building site. But before the bulldozers can move into the Lower Lee Valley, a few obstacles will have to be removed. Not so much buildings, but the people who live and work in them. Today, Olympic bosses got the green light to use compulsory purchase orders. This is Carpenter's Garage on Carpenter's Road, typical of many small businesses in the Lower Lee Valley, employing just a handful of people. And it's a company which could end up out of business because of the Olympics. Managing Director Anita Wicks has been trying for months to find somewhere to go. She says she's been bombarded with potential sites, but not one of them is any use.
They're offering me warehouse units. We're an MOT testing station where we MOT cars and we service vehicles. Now, you can't do that sort of work in a warehouse unit.
When final plans for the Olympic Park were drawn up, 211 firms were in the way. 131 have now been offered alternative sites, which means up to 80 face possible eviction. And it's not just businesses. 200 people in these flats need to be rehoused, and the 40 travellers who live on this site have no idea where they'll end up. The travellers say they've been offered 3 sites so far. The first, a cinema car park, which they rejected. The second, a piece of land not very far away, which was later withdrawn. And now this, a local recreation ground, which is hardly likely to endear them to their new neighbours.
The location itself is a joke because they want to put a 9-foot wall all the way around us. You know, all they need to do is put a sign up, you know, HMP prison, because literally that's what it's going to be like.
The Olympic land grab is being handled by the Mayor's regeneration body, the London Development Agency. Armed with compulsory purchase orders, how likely now are forced evictions?
Our aim is to hand over the site vacant in July next year, but we want to do that by agreement. So the next 6 months we'll continue to negotiate with all occupiers and landowners, even though we have these compulsory purchase powers that will be our ultimate fallback position.
Is it possible that somebody could be evicted?
It's not impossible, but our aim will be to work with everybody to ensure that they get relocated by agreement.
83% of the employment and 2/3 of the firms are already secure and safe. And what we will get at the end of the day is tens of thousands of new jobs, tens of thousands of new homes.
Preparing the ground for the Olympics doesn't come cheap. The bill for buying the land, relocating firms and families and removing pollution is more than £1 billion. Simon Harris, London Tonight, Stratford.
Well, plenty more still to come this Tuesday evening. In a moment, our fantastic competition, which could see you jetting off to India, and without trace, what happens when missing people stay missing.
And Ricky Gervais talks to us about his new movie role alongside Ben Stiller. And then, at 6:30...
Coming up on the ITV Evening News at 6:30, the latest developments in the Suffolk murders. Forensic teams search the home of a second suspect. And an ITV News exclusive, the husband of the murdered policewoman Sharon Beshanivsky speaks of the day his life was torn apart. All the details on those stories and more at 6:30.
But before all of that, our sensational competition. The top prize is a 7-night break in Mumbai, including return flights from Heathrow, accommodation in a 5-star hotel in the city, and airport transfers. You will have to travel between April and September next year.
And sadly, we're not allowed to enter. Anyway, the prize, thanks to the Indian Tourism Office, is to mark the arrival of the Merchants of Bollywood dance show at the Hammersmith Apollo.
The winner and 4 runners-up will also get a pair of tickets to the show's star-studded premiere.
So if you fancy seeing India up close on stage, you just need to answer this question. Mumbai officially became Mumbai in 1995. What was its former English name, still used by many of the city's institutions?
Is it A, Belize, B, Brunei, or C, Bombay?
And if you think you know, text India, then A or B or C, then your name to 85088. That's India, then A or B or C, then your name to 85088. Texts cost £1. Stay tuned, Chrissy will tell you who won at the end of the show.
Right, now, they sound like something out of LA, but panic rooms are being installed in houses across London, not to protect people from intruders, but to give victims of domestic violence somewhere to hide.
40 have been installed in Barnet alone, paid for by the council, and allowing victims to stay in their own home rather than have to move out, often ending up on the streets.
Well, today plans have been unveiled to fund many more of these special rooms. Liz Wickham reports on the Sanctuary scheme.
Feeling safe at home gives victims of a violent partner one essential breathing space.
He just couldn't bear me being out of his sight. I was constantly being accused of having relationships, totally non-existent relationships, being abused and spat at and shouted at in the street, in front of my daughter, in front of my neighbours. And I think the scariest part was when he came and kicked in my front door when my daughter was actually inside and threatened that he'd come back and kill us.
Last year in Barnet, a scheme was trialled to give people like Danny the choice not to move house but to stay at home and have one assault-proof room, giving them time to summon help from the police on a direct line phone.
What we have first of all is the intumescent strip that runs around the edge, which expands if there was a fire, which prevents any smoke from getting into the sanctuary room. We have two Euro profile deadlocks with thumb turns for easy use and quick opening so they can get out if there is an emergency. We had 3 large steel hinges. On the inner side we would have reinforcing bars. The actual frame would be reinforced as well. The idea of reversing the door is that you're now kicking against the whole of the frame, which makes it that much stronger. What we've found is that most of these people have moved on numerous occasions before. This allows them to remain in their own home where they've built up a network of friends and family. Their children are going to school and have made friends, and there's some level of normality in their house.
The scheme doesn't tackle the problem of courts giving absurdly short sentences to perpetrators of domestic violence, but at least in the meantime it can provide a good night's sleep.
It gives women a peace of mind, it also gives the children peace of mind, so the children actually feel safer in their home environment, because it's left my daughter quite scared. And she actually feels a lot happier since we've had the window grills put on the windows. She's just like, oh, this is brilliant, because she feels safe. So in a way, it is good because it gives the children hope, because now she'll sleep easy in her bed and she won't be frightened that he's going to come in and try and find us, or get in through the window, or kick in the door, because these measures are in place.
It was here at Harrow Police Station in 1998 that crime prevention officers first came up with the idea of a sanctuary room. By 2002 they had one council on board, and now it seems it's to go right across London.
What I want to do is see every local authority offer a sanctuary scheme to victims of domestic violence where it's appropriate. Of course, if the perpetrator of domestic violence is living in the home, then that wouldn't be suitable.
It's only a partial solution, yet it's taken 8 years just to get this far. Liz Wickham, London Tonight, Barnet.
Well, we'd like your thoughts on this one tonight. Do you think installing panic rooms in the homes of domestic violence victims is a good idea? Is it a good way to spend council money?
Or do you think that these women should be rehoused away from abusive partners? Do you think that just giving them a room to escape doesn't really solve the problem? We'd like to know what your thoughts are, and we'll read a selection out, as usual, at the end of the programme this evening. Now, every year, hundreds of people go missing. Most are traced very quickly, but some families are left waiting and just wondering.
Awful situation. Exactly 4 years ago, Richard Massey from Ascot vanished. He was working as an IT consultant in New York at the time. Well, tonight on ITV1, a special investigation into his case and the questions that remain unanswered. John Gilbert reports now on the missing man.
Exactly 4 years ago today, 27-year-old Richard Massey from Ascot in Berkshire went missing in New York, where he'd been living and working just 4 months. For his sister Kate and father Brian, the disappearance was totally unexpected.
Richard didn't appear to have any problems at all. He had a good job, he enjoyed his job, had a great place to live, met lots of friends. He was loving it.
Richard called his family the day before he disappeared, saying he was looking forward to coming home for Christmas. They never heard from him again.
And then it was the next day that my parents received a phone call from Richard's company in New York to ask whether Richard had come home early for Christmas, which we found a bit strange, and we said, no, he's not back. And that was really the first indication that something was wrong.
Richard had recently suffered a paranoid attack and sought treatment in hospital.
Richard was in the hospital for about 2 hours, and he was allowed to discharge himself before friends and people from work could get to the hospital to make sure he was okay. And that was the last we know. That's the last we know of his whereabouts.
Frustrated with the New York police, the Masseys decided to hire their own private detective, but his conclusions do not make easy listening.
Why he wasn't treated better or got the proper care from the police, from the emergency